Okay, so now we're going to do a strong imperfect authentic cadence, and we're going to do the key of F. So let's do a strong imperfect authentic cadence. So what's a strong imperfect authentic cadence? Again, it moves from 5 to 1 in the bass, so it's got to have that 5-1 root motion. It shouldn't be an inversion. Remember, an inversion is contrapuntal. And it needs to have in the soprano on the one chord, it needs to either have the third or the fifth scale degree in the soprano. So it can't end on scale degree 1. So your perfect authentic is different because it has 5-1 in the bass, and it ends on scale degree 1. And it usually goes from 7 to 1. There's some exceptions where you might have a slight delay between the 7 and the 1, and then it would have to depend on context and what the composer was trying to convey and how you hear the chord progression to determine whether it's still perfect authentic. But the most important part of the perfect authentic cadence are these three components. You need to have 5-1 in the bass, scale degree 1 in the soprano. So for the strong imperfect authentic cadence, you need to have 5-1 in the bass and scale degree 3 or 5 in the soprano. So we're going to go ahead and do the key of F. So I'm going to put in my F. I know I'm going to have a 5 chord, so I'm going to write that out. My 5 chord in the key of F is C, E, and G. My 1 chord in the key of F is F, A, and C. So I've got my 2 chords. I know I'm going to have to double the roots of both chords, and this also shows me that my 5 chord, the root of the 5 chord is the common tone with the 5th of the 1 chord. So now I need to create my grand staff. I'm going to put in my flat here to indicate my key signature. I'm going to connect those. I'm going to write F here, an uppercase F to indicate F major, and the key signature again helps reinforce that it is an F major. I'm going to write 5 and 1. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is put in my bass line. So I've got a C and an F, because the 5th scale degree of F is C, and the 1st scale degree of F is F. So then I go over here and I knock off my F, one of my Fs and one of my Cs. So then the next thing I'm going to do is my leading tone. I want to get my leading tone out of the way. So my leading tone is a third of the 5 chord. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my E here, and I know it needs to resolve up. So I'm just going to resolve it up to F, and I'm going to write here that this here is my leading tone. So there's no confusion at all. So I got rid of another F on the 1 chord, and I already marked off my E. So now I need my common tone. So let's get rid of our C for the 5 chord and our last C for the 1 chord. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the tenor. And we're just going to hold that over. So there's my common tone. So all I have left is a G and an A, which works out perfectly because I now have scale degree 3 in the soprano. And that's what you need for it to be imperfect authentic, either 3 or 5. So again, let's just show you how to do this in minor. Let's just change the key. Let's try to Roman numeral 5. Notice it's an uppercase Roman numeral, not a Romanette. So we need to make sure that leading tone is raised, or the subtonic, more accurately, is raised to become a leading tone. And I need a minor 1 chord there. So I'm going to use the same exact voicing. You can voice this however you want, as long as you have scale degree 3 or 5 in the soprano, it doesn't matter. As long as you have 5-1 in the bass, you're fine. I'm just going to hold over my common tone again. I'm following the exact same voicing as my previous chord. My leading tone is now an E flat instead of an E. So I need to make that an E natural to make it a leading tone. I'm going to mark that I have the leading tone there. And then again, I'm just going to move from G up to A. So that's how you do your strong imperfect authentic cadence. And you can voice this again any way you want. The only way you couldn't voice this is if you put the alto voice in the soprano, because that would make it a perfect authentic cadence. So just don't do that. So the last thing you need to know is the half cadence. So in reality, a half cadence is any cadence that ends on 5. So it could be any chord that moves to 5, and a cadence, of course, has to come at the end of the phrase. You have to have a melody that ends. Otherwise, it's not a cadence. So when trying to analyze cadence in music, we'll get to this eventually. But right now, just know that you have to look at the melody as well as the chords. Without looking at the melody and the chords, you don't really know if you have a cadence. So for the half cadence, let's go ahead and do A major. So first I'm going to go ahead and write out my A major key signature. So I have 3 sharps, and I need to have a 1 chord moving to 5. So again, you can go from any chord you want to 5, but for now, our half cadence is going to be very strictly 1 moving to 5. So I'm going to go ahead and write in my 1 chord, A, C sharp, and E, and then my 5 chord is E. So E, G sharp, and B. So you notice there are no common tones. There are also no tendency tones you have to resolve. There's still a tendency tone here in the 5 chord, but if you're doing a half cadence, there are no tendency tones to resolve because it will end on this 5 chord. So another thing we want to do is we want to make sure we still double our root. So now that we have this basic sketch pad created for us, I can go ahead and write in my grand staff, and I can write A to indicate the key, and then I can write from 1 moving to 5. Make sure you put in your key signature. And then let's go ahead and put in our bass line. So I'm going to put the A down here and the E up here. So I'm going to knock off one of my A's and one of my E's. Now, ideally, in a half cadence, you move in contrary motion to the bass. The upper 3 voices will either move in contrary motion, or one of the chord tones will stay the same. The common tone will hold over. But you'll either have oblique motion or contrary motion to the bass in the upper 3 voices. And that just gives you the best voice leading. So moving from A to E, if I want to have contrary motion, I'm going to go ahead and put in my other A right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and my common tone here is actually the E, so you do have a common tone. I'm going to go ahead and hold that over. So go ahead and mark that this is in fact the common tone. And let's cross off our E's. So I've now taken care of both the E's for the 5 chord, and I've taken care of my roots for the 1 chord and my 1 E. So now I have a C sharp left, and it doesn't matter how you voice this. You can voice this however you want as long as the bass is moving from 1 to 5, and ideally the upper voices are moving in contrary motion when possible, or maintaining oblique motion like you see right here in the alto. So the C sharp, I have a B or a G sharp that I can go to. Which one makes more sense? Does it make sense to leap down to the G? If you said, no it doesn't, you are correct. You want to move by step. So move from the C sharp down to the B. I'm going to cross that off. And then from my A down to the G sharp. So there it is. That's a 1-5 chord. So again, notice that the only voice that skips, or actually leaps, is the bass. All the other voices move by step. This is the law, which is not really a law, of the shortest way. You want to move the shortest possible distance between each chord member because that creates a smooth chord progression. So this is actually an interesting chord progression though, because you can actually have 2 voices that skip. And that occurs when you have an inversion and you decide to double the 5th. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. And let's go ahead and do this one in the key of C major, just to make it nice and easy. So the key signature is canceled out. Okay, so remember, you can go from any chord to 5. You're not going to want to go from a 1-6-4 to 5. That's actually something else we'll get into later. But the 1-6 is a possibility for a half cadence. So with the 1-6, we're going to have the C chord with the 3rd in the bass. So let's go ahead and get our scratch pad going for this. Our 1 chord for C is going to be C. Actually, I'm going to do it down here because I'm going to show you something we can do here. Okay, so our 1 chord is going to have the notes C, E, and G. Our 5 chord is going to be G, B, and D. So for the 1/6, I know I need to have the third in the bass. So I'm just going to put the third in the bass down here, and this is my scratch pad. And then for the 5 chord, I know that I have to have the G in the bass. So now I've got my doubled root, and I've got my E in the bass here. So what I'm going to do, because we don't want to double the third, is I'm going to get rid of this E. So I'm just going to have a C and a G. And then in order to make this skip, I need to double the fifth. If you double the root, it'll still move by step. And you can try that out on your own. But double the root, it moves by step. This is an example of what happens if you double the root. Just kind of follow the same progression, but make sure you keep the third in the bass. But in this case, we're going to double this fifth. So I'm going to start by putting in my bass line. So I've got an E in the bass, and move up to a G. Okay? So then I'm going to go ahead and mark off my E and my G. And I'm going to mark them off in the bass because I took care of the bass line. So the next thing I'm going to do, I don't have any tendency tones to worry about, so that's not an issue. I'm going to go ahead and just go to my next chord member. So I have a G. So let's get rid of one of these G's. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my C in here. I'm going to fill out my one chord completely. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in my other G. Okay, so now I've finished my one chord. So now it's just a matter of finishing this 5 chord, connecting it. So let's go ahead and move the shortest possible motion for all of these first of all. So first I do have a common tone with this G, so I'm going to hold that over. I'm going to label that as a common tone. So you can't go down here to a D because that would also overlap. You can't go up here to a D because that's not moving by the shortest possible motion at all. That's actually a leap. So you don't want to do that either. So your only option here is to skip. You go from a G up to the B. So now the bass and the tenor in this particular example are moving by thirds. So then the C, you want to have it move up to the D because that's the only chord member left. So this is an example of where you will have thirds that skip. And that's really one of the few examples. Otherwise, you want to have everything moving by step. If you didn't double the fifth of the 1/6 chord, then you wouldn't have to skip. You would be able to move everything by step. But since we doubled the fifth, it leaves us no choice but to skip, because otherwise we'll have an incomplete 5 chord, and we don't want to do that. So if you have any questions on this, please feel free to email me. This shows you how to create your perfect authentic cadences, your imperfect authentic cadences, and your half cadences. That is the most important thing for you to learn right now.